So you are a very good subject of interview because look at you. I asked you questions, you answered. You're very, easy. You're not, prickly or saucy, as Lori would call it.
Oh, Lori. Yeah, Lori. Remember, Lori would sometimes respond to my questions by saying, I'm feeling very saucy today,
Yeah, yeah,
George. Watch out.
so throughout the podcast, she's adamant that she doesn't like being on the podcast. She doesn't like being called, Monuments Woman, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. What is it like interviewing a reluctant subject?
Okay, that was a question I wasn't quite expecting. But now that you've asked me, I would say this. Everybody, or not everybody, most people out there are reluctant subjects when it comes to having somebody come up to them and either publicly or not publicly ask them a million questions about their lives. I think what's unique about Lori is her humility and the fact that she said that she was very reluctant. Because here you are interviewing me. I'm a reluctant subject because I'm used to being the one interviewing people. I'm doing it until now. I didn't say that I was reluctant to do it, right? And so that's my long way of saying that Lori is so honest, and her honesty and her thoughtfulness completely overshadow her reluctance. So she may start by saying, oh, I don't want to be doing this, George. And then an hour and a half later, it's like, are you really the person that started by saying you don't want to be doing this? Because it doesn't show in how you talk. But at the end of the day, we're all reluctant interview subjects because very few people want somebody poking into their most intimate thoughts and then putting it out there in the ether for strangers to hear.
So one of the things that she's adamant about, at least at the beginning of the podcast, is about being called a Monuments Woman, or the name of the podcast being Monuments Woman. But a couple of weeks ago, the Monuments Men and Women's Foundation officially recognized her as the 21st century Monuments Woman.
I kept thinking she must be so unhappy about this.
Yeah, tell it. Like, what happened? What did she do? Is she happy? Is she unhappy? How do you feel? Do you feel redeemed?
Well, that's a question for her, but I will tell you that it helped that it is always a small group of people that is given this honor, men and women. And so I think that she wasn't the only one really helped. Because if she had been the only one, she would have said, guys, there are so many people who are doing great work. Or as she said, as she made it clear in the podcast, one of her reluctance, one of the reasons she was reluctant about being referred to as Monuments Woman, and she certainly said, do not call me the Monuments Woman, because I can't be the only one out there, is that she felt like she really stood on the shoulders of some really wonderful people in doing the work. And a lot of it was teamwork by having amazing Afghans to work with in Kabul and in the provinces. And so I think that was a big part of it. And thank God that the Monuments Men and Women Foundation decided that it would be more than just Lori getting the honor, because otherwise she would have been like, no, it can't be me, it can't be just me.
Well, just for the audience, could you give like a little background about the Monuments Men and Women's work? Because I think from what I could tell, the other thing, I think Lori was just uncomfortable with this title in general, because she, in her mind, had this vision of only certain types of work can qualify you to be called a Monuments Woman.
Yeah, so the foundation was set up to honor the people that had risked their lives to save art and culture. And of course, the starting point for a lot of the work was what happened in World War II, when there was a special unit that was created towards the end of the war in the US, involving people from different countries who were then sent to Europe to help locate some of the art that the Nazis were looting actively looting or to prevent it from being carried off as the Nazis retreated, right? Because they were losing the war badly at this point. Terribly dangerous work. Some of them died. Some of them came back and lived very long, quiet, underappreciated lives. People can learn about this by looking up the foundation's website, but they can also learn a lot by reading the book Monuments Men, which really brings to life their sacrifice. And I think that's where Lori, being humble and having been in dangerous situations, she is basically like, it's not the same. It's not the same. I wasn't in situations as harrowing. I wasn't in situations as dangerous. I didn't really sacrifice myself in the same way. And I see what she means, but she also spent well over a decade of living in Afghanistan and going back and forth in Afghanistan and putting and doing amazing work because this was her calling.
Yeah, and it's true. I think that's what makes the podcast so enjoyable to listen to, because it's not like two people thumping their chest, about all the great work they've done, but more it's approached in a humble way, in a way that is very, I don't think self-deprecating is the right word, but in a way like recognizing that we got the help. It's not something that I went and did it all by myself. And I think it makes it so much more real than when you hear people, talking about something in an expert way, and it's not necessarily acknowledging all the different pieces that go together to make it happen. So what is your vision, or what is your involvement with Afghanistan right now and going forward? Are you doing some work there?
Yeah, so the UN project that I was involving in has drawn to a close, and it's in a little bit of limbo because it's unclear how the UN can continue to do the work it did in Afghanistan, given that there is now a Taliban emirate ruling the place. And so everybody's still trying to find ways to work in Afghanistan. The trouble is that right now, most of the stuff that's getting in is on the basis of humanitarian relief, but it is a trickle in terms of what's really needed. So that's where my work is right now. There might be opportunities in the future, but mostly I'm just thinking about, will I sooner rather than later be able to travel to Kabul to see Jamal and to visit him and his family. So it would be more of a personal trip. The one benefit, sadly, of the Taliban is that the country is a lot safer in terms of being able to do everyday things. You go to the market and you don't worry the way you used to about, let's say, a bombing or something. It's still happening, but far less than before. And that is a sad irony that right now it is safe to travel to a lot of parts of the country that weren't. But you're traveling there and seeing people starving.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
seeing people immiserated.
It's safe for certain people, not all people.
No, not right. Not right.
If you're a journalist,
yeah.
If you work for the previous government, if you're a woman, so definitely that
right.
is.
Absolutely, right. Yeah, I'm speaking from what would be on my passport and my background and just that.
So you think an American would be safe to go?
Yeah. There are Americans there doing now research now there and working on the humanitarian effort, and it's generally been pretty seamless. And that's one of the sad things, that certain things are bureaucratically easier now than they were before, and that is a sign of just how much we failed the past 20 plus years.
If that is the case, why would the UN be reluctant about working in the country? Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, things are not with the government, it's with the help of the people.
Yeah, it's because of the way money flows for development projects, that for certain things, you can bypass the government and dole out humanitarian relief. But once you've crossed the line between something that is a humanitarian project and something that is not an emergency project, but a conventional development project, oh, building bridges in this area, oh, upgrading the water system, upgrading the schools, that then you have to work
Got it.
with the blessing of the government, and you often have to channel money, if not through ministries and their partners, at least get the blessing and the sign off. And that's where it becomes almost impossible if the international community hasn't recognized the government in power. And so we're in this really bizarre position where you're like, how much can we really do on a humanitarian footing indefinitely? Not enough for 40 million people, not enough.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you for that clarification,
Yeah.
because that's one of the things that we Afghans have been scratching our heads, in the sense that the US went and directly negotiated with the Taliban and signed a agreement. So that was okay to do, but now there's, when it comes to actually working with the Taliban, we are having trouble. And of course, the UN and a lot of other aid agencies are following on the what US is signaling out to the world. So
And that's exactly it, that our footprint, our shadow as a country is, we talk about the US declining, the US not having power. These is like our shadow on so much of what the international community does is still so strong, for better or worse. And this is one of those cases where we have a really big moral issue. Like, the longer we put off coming to some sort of official modus vivendi with the Taliban, the more children will die of hunger. The longer the horizon of what will become Afghanistan's normal, right? But it's tough, because do you really want to be an administration in the US government that shakes hands with the Taliban and then starts to have normal relations when there's still being real shits when it comes to women's rights, especially, and human rights in general?
yeah.
You know?
Our time is coming to a
Mm.
close. And now, looking back, like going back to where we started, now, of all the many brilliant things you've done, you can add podcast host to your LinkedIn profile, since you are active on LinkedIn and not other social media. So,
Yeah, that's by design.
so the question is, like, what are your hopes and dreams for the Monuments of Women podcast? Are we going to hear more from you two? Are you going to, do you have some vision where you're going to go from here?
I would love to do a second season with Lori. We'll have to see where her heart is, because even though she was a spectacular person to be doing this with, it wasn't easy for her, because the fact of the matter is that she can't go back right now as a State Department employee to do this work. She just can't. And so it's tough. So the question for me is, what would a second season be about? I don't want her to just go over some of the stories and dig deeper. I want to tread new ground. Maybe it's her work in Central Asia. She's doing pretty amazing work in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, as well as in South Asia, from Pakistan to Sri Lanka. But I'm also, sometimes when I just think about this, I would be like, I wonder if it would be interesting to people if our second season, if we had a second season that was focused on what is happening right now in Afghanistan to these cultural heritage sites, now that a lot of the restoration and preservation work isn't continuing, mostly for lack of money. And at the same time, to also focus on another layer, which is so many incredibly talented Afghans had to leave their homeland, had to leave the country that was everything to them. What are they doing right now in the places where they are refugees, where they are settling in, where they are building a new life to maintain Afghan culture? And it's reconvening. It's gonna be reshaped. It's going to take place. But a lot of Afghan culture is now going to be made very actively outside Afghanistan. And I wonder if that would be a really interesting thing to focus on, because a lot of the people that Laura worked with left the country, not all, but many, and they're thinking what's ahead of them.
I would definitely listen to that season two for sure, especially because now everything that we hear in the news about the cultural heritage sites is from the lens of, are the Taliban protecting it and why? Every article you see is like, oh, they're protecting the National Museum because it's going to, they see it as a source of value. So yeah, I mean, that would be amazing. I would love to see that and hear more from the two of you, as well as the Afghans who have left, because that's a huge brain drain from the country, right? I mean, if we
Um,
somehow, preserve not only what they knew, but also how they are bringing the culture to other places that they're resettling, that would be a lot of fun. And I would very much love to hear that podcast. Thank you so much, George, for talking to me today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and your openness and knowledge, and how much you care about Afghanistan. That comes through in every episode. And as an Afghan, I'd really like to appreciate you for that, because that is a very important part of any kind of work that we can do, is that we really care about the people and where we go, rather than it is just a job. And that comes through in everything you say and share on this podcast. So thank you very much for being the champion of Afghanistan and Afghan people.
oh, thank you. That's it's humbling, and it's really sweet of you to say. It was a labor of love. It's a country that is, at least from my perspective, hard not to love, and a people that I find just, for all their challenges, tremendously likable. And I've learned from Afghans at every step of the way since I've been involved. So thank you.